Well, there you go. So we will also, like I said, we'll have timers to try and help us all share airtime. We really want to, especially in our breakout rooms, give our participants time to talk. Also help us be mindful that we do have limited time. Okay. So you can message us in the chat for assistance. You can also email webinars@idasecretariat.org. Okay. We're also trying to produce a white paper through this session. We want this to be a great discussion. We also want to capture this so we can help push forward the use and the impact of universal design for learning. So we will be capturing your participation today to try to put that together into a set of recommendations that we can publish and disseminate to continue to push forward some progress with UDL. We're doing our welcome. We'll do our introductory overview. Then you'll move into breakout sessions. There's quite a few of us here today. We decided to give you choice on that. So that can be a little messy. That can take a little bit of extra time. But we wanted to give you those multiple opportunities to choose the topics you'd really like to delve into. Okay? So our breakout will have research, policy, systems change, and classrooms. Tried to set it up so maybe you can drop into a few, but I hope when you get in there, you'll really be able to contribute to the discussion. Overview, I saw that some people in the group would need a little bit of overview. So a quick top level overview. Why do we do universal design for learning? To create truly inclusive spaces. Those of us who have taught know anytime you're in a classroom, you've got broad needs. Children have different needs, come from different backgrounds, speaking different languages, and have individual attention spans, interests. They're bringing different profiles. Universal design is a framework for designing lessons for all. When it's implemented mindfully, it allows for inclusive opportunities across systems. But something we'll be making clear today, it is not one size fits all. It is not a brittle method. It's a design approach. It depends on the quality of the designer for work. It can increase inclusivity across classrooms, but it does not replace the need to assure specific supports for specific needs. I think in terms of pyramids, this is an inclusive system that serves all students with additional supports for some students and more intensive supports for several students. Universal design for learning assures that we have inclusive practices across our environment, and each section of the pyramid depends on the inclusivity of the other. A child with disabilities is a child first, and a child needs to find a welcoming, supportive environment across their school, better yet, across their community. Okay. The goal of UDL is helping every child become an expert learner. We are not treating children. We're developing learners. We want learners who are engaged, who are purposeful, motivated learners. We want students, we want children who are resourceful, knowledgeable, know how to get the information that they need. Also have the ability to have action and expression in their classrooms, can be strategic, goal-directed learners. So again, universal design is creating spaces that have outcomes of expert learners, okay? Not a treatment, it's a developmental, constructive approach, okay? So for our introductions today, we have brought a team of experts who will be speaking in depth across, we'll be sharing insights on research, we'll be sharing insights on policy with people who've got deep experience on what's working and what the challenges are. Okay? We'll be talking about systems change. It's great to have a good idea of something that's great. It's harder to actually move systems into inclusive approaches. And then we'll be sharing insights from actual classroom participants. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up our folks. So Sean Tesney will be talking to us about a bit of an introduction to the research that's been going on in the realm of universal design. So welcome, Sean.
Thank you, Leah. Thank you for that very interesting introduction and a very sort of bird's eye view of the session today, and looking forward to learning more from others. So welcome to the section on current research in UDL in low middle income countries. My name is Sean Tesney, and I'm CBM's Global Advisor for Education. CBM, Christoffel Blinden Mission, Christian Blind Mission EV, is an international Christian development organization with over 100 years experience committed to improving the quality of life of persons with disabilities in the poorest countries of the world. And today we're launching the CBM and Ideas report on UDL in low middle income countries. I'm joined by Including Disability in Education in Africa, IDEA Research Unit, based at the University of Cape Town, UCT, in South Africa. IDEA's objective is to act as a hub for future research and inclusive education in Africa and beyond, to promote networking and to carry out training within this field. CBM has a long-standing partnership with IDEA. So when we wanted to reach out for research in this area, we contacted a director of the IDEA, Associate Professor Judith Mackenzie, to lead a desk research into UDL in low and middle income countries. She is supported in this research by Dr. Amani Carissa, who will present on our behalf, and Dr. Callista Kahonde. CBM acknowledged that the importance of UDL as a framework for implementing inclusive education, but also recognized the minimal evidence and guidance on how to effectively implement it in low middle income countries. So we needed a deeper understanding before we could look towards training and share knowledge on the subject. Having commissioned IDEA to review current UDL practices, training needs, and relevant online resources in low middle income countries, I'm very pleased to present our findings and key recommendations presented here for the first time today. So I'd like to pass us over to Dr. Amani Carissa, and we hope that you will later join us for further discussions in the research session. Thank you. Over to you, Amani, and to the next slide, please.
Thank you, Sean. I'm Dr. Amani Carissa, currently in Kenya, but working with IDEA at the University of Cape Town. I'll go straight ahead with the research. So we conducted a scoping review, and we selected 21 peer-reviewed articles. These articles came from South Africa, China, Tanzania, Botswana, Brazil, Iraq, Ghana, Cameroon, Jamaica, Kazakhstan, and the Philippines. Several themes emerged, but today we focus on 5 themes, which are capacity building of teachers, levels of technology, role of communities and families, disability, and UDL, as well as the challenges. Next slide, please. So the first theme, capacity building of teachers. It is evident that teachers or instructors are generally not trained in and are unaware of UDL. Teacher training on UDL in some places happens on an informal level, and mostly with the support of partners from high-income countries. The next slide, please. Under the levels of technology, there are challenges around technology access and effectiveness of technology. Although there have been efforts to adapt to use low-tech, locally available resources. Next slide, please. Another role of communities. This is neglected in the literature. Although there are some papers that cite discriminatory views of persons with disabilities, general discriminatory views of people with disabilities in the community, Also, there's a mention of poverty, abuse, and mental health related issues, which make it difficult for families to engage with education and UDL. However, it is recognized that communities have a role to play, have an important role to play when it comes to UDL. I now focus on the role of, yes, next slide, please. Under disability and UDL, most studies focus on disability or learning challenges without identifying the intersectionality of disability with other issues, which could cause discrimination. And it's also seen that poverty in low to middle income contexts or countries affects the way diversity and disability is understood. And teachers might resist in such challenging environments. Inclusive education also might seem as a low priority, affecting only children with disabilities. And UDL and inclusive education could be poorly understood as interchangeable concepts. Next slide, please. Now I'll focus on the challenges, and some of these challenges are rooted in the education system as a whole, like large class sizes, extremely difficult working conditions, lack of resources, as well as low pay of teachers. Teachers need to consider students' personalities and behavior affecting their learning. So it's not only about the curriculum or the content of the curriculum, but there's also issues of personalities and behavior. Also, another challenge is the focus on formal exams. There's also the challenge of the lack of support professionals to guide teachers in adapting their teaching. Also, there are inaccessible environments and an absence of effective screening and identification services. Other challenge concerns language and also culture. These ones affect the dissemination of knowledge about UDL. For example, it is reported that there is no Chinese website on inclusive learning or UDL. And UDL and inclusive learning are not popular topics in Chinese educational research. Teachers, the other challenge is teachers and lecturers' attitudes and resistance might stand in the way of the use of UDL, especially where disability is associated with inability and low expectations. There's also the tendency to question the extent to which a concept that is created in high-income contexts can be imported into low-income contexts, where poverty is the driving force. Next slide, please. Now we talk about the potential impact of UDL. So it's not only what challenges, but also what can UDL bring forward. There's a strong recognition that it has a lot of potential. It is UDL can lead to higher achievement outcomes and thus reduce the risk of stigma for children with disabilities. So that's why it's recognized that that can happen with the use of UDL. It's also possible UDL can allow for recognizing the individuality of learners and creating more collaborative approaches. It can also lead to that. And the third point there is it can lead to increased digital inclusion if support structures are implemented that support equity and accessibility based on the UDL principles. The other point is that UDL's features of openness, flexibility, and foresight can enlighten teaching and learning practice, moving the focus of current teaching methods from curriculum to the learners. Also, UDL blends very well with local philosophies of personal responsibility, including Confucianism, which is a Chinese philosophy, Ujamaa, Ubuntu, which is African philosophies. And also it blends very well with interactive learning and the need to meet students' needs, all those philosophies. And there is also the tendency to advocate for a critical and contextualized approach to UDL in the global south. So with that, it could be linked to more fruitful realization of educational goals. So for future research, From all that, we consider what we can do maybe to further this gospel of UDL. So what kinds of capacity building in UDL is needed for teachers? That could be a research. What are the needs of teachers for UDL? We also need information on that. The third one is, how does lack of resources affect UDL? How can teacher resistance to UDL be overcome? What is the understanding of UDL and inclusive education? And the sixth one is, what kind of collaboration with educators and researchers from high-income countries is useful for UDL? How can technology be used for UDL in low to middle income contexts? And the last one is, what is the role of families and communities in implementing UDL? Next slide, please. So this comes from our report, and this report is available on that website, www.idea.uct.ac.za. The second link there just directly brings to the report. So for more information about all this, please, you are invited to look at that report. Thank you very much.
And thank you. Exciting. Next up, we're going to talk about policy. We'll be starting with Emily Vargas Baron. Welcome, Emily.
Thank you very much, Leah. I just wanted to commend Amani for the research that was just presented. It's extremely important, and it leads into the discussion on policies. Next slide, please. In RISE Institute in 2019, we conducted a global survey in collaboration with UNICEF on early intervention and inclusive early childhood programs. And we put in a question about UDL, and we were dismayed to find that barely 20% of the programs were currently using UDL. There is some awareness, but generally there's a lack of awareness of UDL and how its methodologies can be of great assistance, especially in diverse communities with different cultures, different languages, as well as different abilities in the children. We find that few policies call for UDL. Where they are being included is in early childhood development multi-sectoral policies, but rarely do you find it in the education policies, and those policies that are for early education or pre-K or pre-primary school rarely mention it, and we find that dismaying. Also, we found in our study that there is a lack of training of principals, supervisors, and teachers in UDL concepts and methods. Next slide, please. Now, what to do about this? It certainly is something that is remediable. We have various types of strategies for including UDL in policies. First of all, multisectoral ECD policy instruments can be an excellent venue for mentioning UDL in talking about any kind of learning, but most especially we're dealing with early learning and pre-primary education. Education sector policy instruments really should be given far more attention so that we have all policies that deal with inclusive ECE or ECCE or ECCD is used in different parts of the world, will include UDL as a concept and method for moving forward for inclusivity. And of course, also at primary and secondary level, so you can have it moving upward as well. Standards is where we come in, where UDL can certainly be mentioned in standards for services, standards for personnel, and standards for personnel performance. Regulations, guidelines, and accreditation oftentimes could include UDL. What strategic priorities should be included under these policies? Well, one of them is definitely advocacy, awareness raising about UDL at all levels, and what are its contributions to attaining our Sustainable Development Goal 4.2 that is extremely important as the foundation of all learning for children. Pre and in-service training, workforce development oftentimes is a strategic priority for ECD policies and for early childhood education policies. There, UDL can definitely be mentioned as an important approach. Parental involvement and participation. UDL is not just for the schoolroom, it is for the whole family and for involving the family in the child's learning. Institutional implementation is extremely important. Without the support of principals, supervisors, and key head teachers, we will not have the teachers feeling comfortable and confident and empowered to use the UDL system within their culture and their languages. Clearly, UDL should be mentioned in accountability, monitoring and evaluation, processes themselves, output and outcome indicators, and feedback to planning. Especially important is that UDL is the pathway for ensuring that all children are included in school, from the children with typical development through to all different types of special needs. So I am very pleased to now introduce Sue Swenson, who is the president of Inclusion International and has had a most illustrious record in helping to improve the developmental potential of all the children that have been in the program she has assisted in so many countries. Sue?
Hi, everybody. And this is just a quick elevator speech to invite you to our breakout session. Please join us in the policy breakout session. I am here representing the International Disability Alliance today, which I have the pleasure of sitting on the board because of my role at Inclusion International. IDA's contribution today will be to address the relationship between UDL, accessibility, and reasonable accommodation, and how that can be sorted out in policy efforts and what we can do moving forward. I just want to mention that IDA will soon publish a paper, probably within 2 weeks, to explore UDL and what it means to learners with disabilities. It will be joining up with our significant paper on SDG 4, our flagship report on inclusive education, and the GEM report 2020. Please join us in the policy section. I just want to personally say, I served the Obama administration in the Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services, and we made significant research investments in the development of UDL over many decades, certainly well before I was on board. But we learned while I was there that we needed to fold it into the Elementary and Secondary Education Act to impact the needs of all students and all learners in the United States. That's an interesting floor for policy to have, but it's the personal commitment of teachers, principals, families, and students that makes UDL work. Please join us. And I'm going to pass it off to Ann Hayes for her elevator speech.
Thank you, Sue and Emily. Just to follow up on what we'll talk about is really why UDL is needed within policy. And if you analyze policies that have taken place, often they would talk about in the past the need for flexible curriculum or differentiation of curriculum. And when that comes to practice for teachers, there's also a lot of ambiguity about what that means. And the benefit of UDL is that it's taking a lot of the practices that are happening already, but gives teachers very concrete ways to deliver the curriculum within their respective countries. So I think as we look to the need for UDLs, just having something in there specifically does provide that sort of implementation, allows for funding and programs to be allowed and contributed to that. So we're going to talk a little bit about what policies are now referencing UDL and how we can go from policies to implementation in the group. Thank you so much.
Excellent. It's going to be a rich discussion across our breakout rooms. All right. Well, an introduction to the process that we'll be talking about today of actually making systems change well. So we have Louis Lord Delson and Gulnar Abedin who will be sharing.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. So it's my opportunity to convince you to come to this systems level implementation group. Next slide. So you'll get to learn a little bit more about Gulnar and myself, but we will be each focusing on stories specific to using the UDL framework for system change. And I will be focusing on some work that was in Uganda. I'll switch to Golnar now.
Hello, everyone. We would love for you to join us in our systems level implementation session with Louis. I'm excited to present today, and I will be sharing a couple of examples of school level and district level implementation of UDL that was done over the last 10 years here in Washington, D.C., talking about some of the barriers that we're trying to address with the projects, as well as some of the inputs, educational inputs that were implemented to achieve UDL at a systems level. So we hope that you would join us in our session. Next slide, please. To learn more about the examples we will give, again, at a school level implementation, where a school was designed using UDL principles to have a broader impact on the students in this school, as well as a district level implementation during COVID school closures to provide UDL training to teachers in a district, and a no-tech example of school level implementation that Louis will be presenting. Next slide.
So just to get everyone geared up, when we're talking about a system, what are we going to be saying? Well, we know that a system is made up of different components, and they all serve a purpose within this larger system, but they all affect one another. So if you look at the image on the screen, we have different size dots that are different hues of purple, but you can see all the lines that are connecting them. They're all interconnected. Next slide. But when you're using and thinking about system change, when one of those components changes, we can't think of it as just doing its own thing. It's going to affect the entire system because it's all interconnected. So looking back over to the right of the screen, all those dots, some of them have changed size, many of them have changed colors. They're not even purple anymore, but they're still interconnected. And these are really valuable things for us to think about as we're bringing UDL into our environments and using it to empower our learners. Next slide. So the framework in itself can initiate fabulous systems change because it's going to change how instruction is delivered. It's going to change how we even think about our learners, because all of a sudden we see them as these rich and empowered learners. And finally, the framework, it alters how you design your environment. It alters how you think about your environment. And just these three things, it can do even more than that, but just these three things, those aren't tiny dots within a system of education. Those are huge impacting dots. So you can see how much of an influence the UDL framework can have. Next slide. So when we're thinking about leading change through UDL implementation, we need to recognize that it's part of a journey, that this is a framework that is adopted, and so it does take some time. But you're going to also be looking closely at barriers. That's already been talked about. But within systems change, you're talking about the inherent barriers, and you're also really digging up those unobserved barriers. You're recognizing that this is an iterative process. There are different systems change processes that are used around the world. We have some that we focused on when I was at CAST during my postdoc. We had a specific type of systems change that we looked at, but there are different ones throughout the world, but all of them recognize that systems change is iterative. It is never just step-by-step, one moving forward. You're going to go back, you're going to go forward, and it's never going to be straightforward. This has to be recognized up front. And finally, understanding why. Why are you using the framework? What is your goal? What's driving you? And Golnar is going to talk a little bit more about that because she's going to get to our questions. Next.
So in our session, we will be framing our examples as well as our discussion with you around this why question to assess the barriers to achieving the goal of inclusive quality education for all. So we will start with the question of why do you think your system needs to change? Next slide. And in our examples, we will also discuss UDL-driven inputs that have that can add an impact to the system we're working within. So we will share in our stories what those inputs were that were implemented at a systems level and what the results were, and ask you to also think about identifying some of the inputs and organizational components that would need to change. Next slide. So as Louis mentioned, UDL is a framework that shapes a journey towards the implementation of inclusive education. And in that journey, at a systems level implementation, we want to identify, again, what are the strategic educational inputs to design or change, and identify some of the institutional and systems-based, as well as mindset barriers in a district level implementation that may come up in the process. So we look forward to sharing those stories with you and hearing about your examples, and hope that you will join us in the systems change breakout session of UDL. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much. It's going to be so hard for people to choose their breakout sessions. Okay, well, we've got presenters also here today to share some insights from classrooms. So I do believe we've got Asana. Haley, were you going to do a quick introduction too?
Introduce her presentation.
Thank you.
So hi, everybody. My name is Haley Nayad from Inclusive Development Partners. And IDP has had the pleasure of collaborating with a number of educators in Ghana over the past few years to implement universal design for learning teaching strategies in early grade classrooms. And Miss Asana Abdullahi, or I should say Abdullahi Asana, is a teacher in Northern Ghana, and she has recorded a little audio snapshot of the types of UDL strategies that she uses in her classroom with her learners. So we'll go ahead and welcome her and hear from her audio recording.
Oh, pardon me, I'm running these. So, oops, bear with me just one moment. I'll try to get us back there. And I wonder, is she able to speak with us in case my technology is not going to work
Also,
well?
if you want me to share the screen, I can do it on my end.
Okay, that'll be great. Okay. Let me pop out of here.
Sure.
Thank you.
Everyone, my name is Abdullahi.
Can you hear that?
A teacher from Alamiya.
Can you hear that, everybody?
Yes, we're good. Thank you.
Primary School Block. Hello, everyone. My name is Abdullahi Asana, a teacher from Falahiyat EA Primary School Block in Damango. I would like to talk about some of the UDL strategies that I use now in my class, which I was not using as a teacher. And these strategies help both learners with and without disabilities. Multiple means of engagement, that is, different ways to motivate my learners to learn. Here I use morning meetings as a strategy. This is where I review the previous lessons with my learners. And this is how I do it. Myself and my learners will be in a circle where we can all see ourselves. Then I will pass the ball around. When the ball gets to you, then you have to tell us what you have learned the previous day. Here, I also discuss the day schedule with my learners. That is the activities that we'll be doing for the day. That's to prepare them for each activity. I also use songs in my introduction, and my children like songs a lot. Whenever I sing the song, they are always happy and they pay attention during the teaching. Multiple means of representation. That is how to present the information to my learners. Here, some learners learn by visually looking at the information, Others learn by writing down the information. So here, I use both large and small group instructions. Here, I get to give individual attention to the smaller groups, whilst the other groups are being given a specific task to work on. I also use misgrouping. In my groups, I have group leaders. Even when I am not with the group leaders will make sure that the specific task being given them will be done on time. I use think, pair, share. Here, when I ask a question, the individual learner will have to think of his or her answer, then they will discuss in pairs and then share it within the smaller group. This is to make all my learners talk during lesson, and it is helping a lot. Then, multiple means of action and expression. Here, learners get the chance to select whether they would like to answer the question orally, write the answers in their books, or choose to draw teachers to support their answers. And this is working perfectly in my class. I am very happy and proud to be part of UDL because I have learned a lot. And this is helping my learners in my class. As I am talking to you right now, if you come to my class, my walls are talking. And this attracts different learners from different classes to come to my class during break to also learn. And this also gives my learners the opportunity to learn when I am not even there. Because everywhere there are writings, drawings, so many things in my class just to engage my people. And I'm very, very happy and proud to be part of UDL.
So thank you. Yes, thank you so much to Miss Asana, and we'll turn it over to Yassine, who will also tell us more about the things we'll discuss in our classroom breakout room. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Hailey. Thank you so much, everyone, for the amazing presentation. So before I start presenting, what are we going to talk about during our classroom? I just want to ask all of you one question. Okay, but before that, I'm going to use a Mentimeter. I'm going to share with you a link in the chat, and then I just need you to answer briefly my question. Just give me 1 minute so I can share my presentation. Okay, perfect. Good. Okay. 1 minute. Okay, perfect. Okay, so now you can all see my question. I'm going to share the link now and also the code. You can use this code to be able to type in. And my question is, how does the learning process happen? For example, did you ever wonder, I'm sure you did, so just how students can interact with the information, what's happening inside their mind or their brain, and how they encounter information. Just try to answer briefly, and then your answers will appear here. And then we can go further more with more details. So just think about how students learn, how they encounter. Okay, good. Interactional. Just give me 1 minute. I have a lot of windows open. Okay, so through interaction practice. Do you have any other ideas? Okay, perfect. Active engagement triggered by, okay, I lost triggered. We have a lot of answers, as you can see. Reflection, experience, play, supported, triggered by stimuli, engagement. Okay, perfect. There's all are great answers. Okay, but okay, as you can see, answers are coming in. Thank you so much for those amazing ideas. I'm already impressed with the colors and the answers as well. So yeah, before I answer my question, and also what's the relation between UDL and the learning process? I'm gonna share some of the quotes later from one of my dearest and former colleague. But before that, I'm gonna just give you a quick overview about what are we going to talk about during our presentation. So, okay, let me just prepare my PowerPoint. Okay, perfect. Okay, awesome words. So before I talk about before I talk about the learning process, I just want to say that during our breakout room, we will be talking about the challenges that both teachers and students face. Also, we're going to talk about strategies. How are we going to solve those challenges? And then we're going to be talking specifically about training tools for teachers. How are we going to prepare teachers to teach and make their classroom more inclusive? And also how teachers can train their students and make sure that all understand or they are included, everyone is on the picture and everyone is learning. So the learning, going back to the learning process. So the learning process happens when the learner encounters information for the first time and analyze it by comparing it to a previous knowledge. And here comes recognition networks, the what of learning. And then sends it to short memory. Then relevant information the learner identifies with and feels it, makes sense, engage it more. And that this will become the role of effective network, the why of learning. And then to interact with the information, build on it and express the learning through what the different learning tasks. Here comes strategic networks, the how of learning, and more interaction and action on the information itself sends it to a long-term memory, and this is how the learning happens and the relationship of UDL with that. This was inspired by my former colleague Mohammed Aziz during our teacher training course. So without taking any further ado, we'll be joining our breakout rooms now. So please, I believe now you have all great ideas from the speakers about the breakout rooms and what will be happening, the magic that will be happening. So before we start, I'm gonna start the breakout rooms, but I want you just an easy thing to do. Just 4 squares will appear next to your window. It's like a little bit of Rubik cube. And then just you need to click and choose the breakout room that you want to join, whether policy, systems, research, or classroom. Okay, so I'm gonna start the presentation, the breakout room now. Leah, do you have any notes before we start?
Yes, just that we're making this might take a little bit more time, but on many of your registrations, you just mentioned that you'd really like to be able to discuss several things. So we had the option of assigning you to just swoop directly to a breakout room, but in the interest of choice, we will guide you to your breakout rooms. Yeah, and just to review, our interpreters and captioners will follow the policy group. We've also, though, set up the discussion in all of our groups where we've got multiple opportunities to participate. So you should find accessibility in all groups, but if you'd like to follow our sign language interpreters, they'll be following the policy group. So I am watching with you for the breakout rooms to pop up. When they do, just go ahead and click the room that you would most like to join. Again, during that process, we are trying to really also hear from you. So go to a room that you are prepared to either share some things that you're doing or share some compelling thoughts or some observations that we can really include in our own analysis and sharing of best practices or concerns from around the world. So I will let Yassine and our hosts dive into the breakout room process, and I will watch to see how I can assist. So let's all focus on our screens to see our breakout rooms pop up, and then just click the topic that you would like to go to.
Okay, perfect. If you have any difficulties, you can ask Anas, Hamza, or any one of the facilitators to help you out. Okay, so going now, and everyone is ready to go.
As you go, just one last idea, as I'll make some noise as you make your choice. We are going to bring you back, and we would like to just hear, each group will give us a 2-minute readout of some of the best practices or challenges that you discuss. So we will be trying to tag, hopefully, a participant who will be brave and welcome to share the readout from your room when we come back. Okay, let's go discuss.